the North Chapel on Highway 21 in Sylacauga, and the Childersburg Chapel on Highway 280 in Childersburg. For pre-need funerals, burials, and cremation since 1975, Curtis & Son Funeral Home, Sylacauga, Childersburg. In obituary news this morning, Mary Thornton died last night in Goodwater, and Curtis & Son Funeral Home, the North Chapel, will announce those arrangements for Mary Thornton, who passed away last night. And also, celebration of life for Noah Perry will be Saturday night at 6 p.m. from the Cowboy Church down in Fayetteville. That starts at 6. Curtis & Son Funeral Home, North Chapel, directing that service. Funeral service for Mrs. Joanne Swain Stone will be Saturday at 11 a.m. from Community Funeral Home in Sylacauga. Burial in the Mount Carmel Baptist Church Cemetery in Alpine. Visitation today, 1 until 7 at the funeral home. Community Funeral Home, Sylacauga, directing. Graveside service for Mr. Melvin Averett will be Saturday at 1 p.m. from Evergreen Cemetery in Sylacauga. Visitation today, 1 until 7 at the funeral home. Community Funeral Home, directing. Graveside service for Mr. Brian Garrett is Saturday at 1 o'clock from Baker's Grove Church Cemetery in Vincent. Visitation Saturday at the church from 12:30 until 1 p.m. Community Funeral Home, directing. Graveside service for Mrs. Alberta Williams is Saturday as well at 2 o'clock from Friendship Baptist Church Cemetery in Sylacauga. Visitation is today 1 until 7 at the funeral home. Community Funeral Home, directing. And graveside service for Mrs. Gloria Averett. That graveside service Sunday at 2 o'clock from Union Baptist Church Cemetery in Sylacauga. Visitation Saturday from 1 until 7. Now, online condolences to all of these funeral services from Community Funeral Home. You can go online at communityfuneralhome.org. Community Funeral Home in Sylacauga in charge of the arrangements. Graveside service for Mr. Ricky Sanchez will be 1 o'clock Saturday at Rigginstown Cemetery in Fayetteville. Curtis & Son Funeral Home, directing. Funeral service for Randall Jones, age 69, of Sylacauga, is today at 2 o'clock from the chapel of Radley Smith Funeral Home. Brother Perry Sims officiating. Burial in the New Site Baptist Church Cemetery. Mr. Jones died November 17th. He was a longtime member of the Faith Baptist Church in Sylacauga. The station today, noon until 2 at the funeral home. Radley Smith Funeral Home, Sylacauga, directing. Funeral service for Alfredia Brooks is 1 o'clock Saturday at Wright's Funeral Home Chapel in Alexander City. Visitation today, 4 until 6 at the funeral home. Wright's Funeral Home, directing. Celebration of Life service for Eleanor Baker, age 82, is today at 2 o'clock from Life Church in Oxford, Alabama. Graveside service for Mrs. Irma Davenport, age 77, of Alexander City, is today at Cross Key Baptist Church Cemetery. That'll be at 1 o'clock. That cemetery is on Pearson Chapel Road in Alexander City. Armours Memorial Funeral Home, directing. Funeral service for Mr. James Wade Poole of Alexander City will be Saturday at 1 o'clock from Holloway Funeral Home, with burial in the Armour Memorial Gardens. Visitation today from 1 until 8 at the funeral home. Holloway Funeral Home and Cremation, Alexander City, directing. Donald Edgeworth Little Sr. died October 14th. Memorial gifts may be sent to First Presbyterian Church, P.O. Box 96, Alexander City, Alabama, 35011. Celebration of life for Mr. James Terry Davis, age 70. It will be Saturday at 11 o'clock from the chapel of Radley Funeral Home. Reverend Dr. Gerald Hallmark and the Reverend Keith Hibbs officiating. Military honors provided by the Alexander City Veterans Honor Guard. The family receiving friends Saturday, 10 o'clock till 10:45 at the funeral home. Radley Funeral Home, directing. Celebration of life for Annie Lee Wesley Heath, age 77, is 1 o'clock Saturday at DeForest Chapel on the campus of Talladega College. Visitation is 2 till 7 today at the funeral home. Terry's Metropolitan Mortuary directing. Remembering the life of Mr. Davion Dontrell Beck, age 35 of Talladega. That remembrance Saturday at noon from S.M. Goodson Funeral Home Chapel with Pastor James Curry officiating. Interment in the Faith Temple Ministry Cemetery. There'll be a public viewing for Mr. Beck today from 1 until 6 at S.M. Goodson Funeral Home. S.M. Goodson Funeral Home directing. Graveside service for Essie Tiny Dates, age 69, is Saturday at 2 o'clock from Kingston Memorial Gardens. Visitation today, 2 until 7. Terry's Metropolitan Mortuary directing. Celebration of life, remembering the life of Mr. Benitez Oliver Evans, age 36 of Talladega, will be Sunday at noon from S.M. Goodson Funeral Home Chapel. Pastor Gregory Adams officiating. Interment in the Kelly Springs Memorial Gardens. Public viewing Saturday from 1 until 6 at the funeral home. S.M. Goodson Funeral Home directing. And celebration of life for Mrs. Maddie Ross Kidd McCorney will be Saturday at 11 o'clock from Mount Canaan Baptist Church Cemetery in Vincent. Visitation today from 1 until 6 at Grace Memorial Chapel in Sylacauga. Grace Memorial Funeral Home, Sylacauga directing. 4 minutes before the hour, we continue on Daybreak Live this morning. Obituary brought to you by Curtis & Son Funeral Home, Sylacauga, Childersburg.